I think the thing that I love the most about steel is that everyone sees it as this incredibly structural and solid material. But then when you heat it up in the forge, it becomes pliable and malleable, and you can bend it in any way you want, even kind of tie it in knots, and then it'll harden back into an incredibly solid structure. So an artist blacksmith is more someone who makes gates and railings and sculptural pieces, compared to a traditional blacksmith who would be more maybe swords and horseshoes. I always knew I wanted to do something really practical, but I wasn't quite sure what. Art was always something that I was interested in. I went to work for a blacksmith just outside Glasgow called John Creed, he was in his 70s when he was teaching me, and now he's in his 80s, but he's still going strong. And he's much more the sort of traditional blacksmith. He's like a huge, hulky guy. And yeah, just sort of fell in love with the material. Thought that was the thing I wanted to do. I started about a year ago making life drawings in steel because I realised that people often see steel as being this masculine kind of thing, and I wanted to try and soften it, try and make people see the steel in a slightly different way. So this is a full-scale version of what I'll be doing. So I've done some sketches in my sketchbook, and then I was going to do them full scale so that I've got a line to follow when I'm in the actual forge. I used to have a coal forge, but yeah, it's burning coal didn't feel very nice or environmental. You come out of it looking like you've been down a chimney. So I thought it was probably best to move on to a gas one, which allows you to keep all of the steel at one temperature. What I really like about steel is because it comes in these bars, it is really easy to make it look like a drawing. I chop the steel down into lengths, heat those lengths up in the forge and bend them using various different tools, including ones called the dogs, which are really helpful for bending things. I use pliers, I use the hammers and my anvil to kind of form things over. So I'm going to choose a piece to draw first. Go for this bit. I think it's really just about allowing the steel to follow the lines that you've drawn. With normal drawing, you've got a blank space and you are creating a line. With the steel, you're bending the line to the form that you want it to be. It's a different method of creating a form. When I've made all of the different elements, I weld them together using the MIG welder. And then grind back any of the welds that don't flow very nicely. It's done! I paint on a finish that kind of blackens all of the steel to be a similar colour, because at that point there'll be parts of the steel that are quite dark, some parts that are very bright and shiny from the bits that I've ground off, and I think it's quite nice to have a slightly more constant colour. When I first started doing this about 10 years ago, I realised that whenever I told someone what I did, the response was often, "Oh, but you're a woman," or "Isn't that a bit of a manly job?" And there was a guy recently who called up and he just said, "Can you take a message for the blacksmith?" And I was like, "Oh, but that's me." And he was like, "Oh, never mind then," and hung up. I was like, "Oh." So I think there is still this idea that it's not something that I should be able to do, but the blacksmithing community has always been incredibly welcoming, and there's tons of women who work in steel. In fact, the 3 people that taught me when I was at university were all women. I think people think that you have to be incredibly strong to do this, and you don't really, because as soon as you heat up the steel, it becomes this incredibly pliable thing. It doesn't take a lot to work with. It's a really fun material to use, and teaching people how to use it, there's always this moment where they kind of, someone's kind of struggling with it, and then they understand it suddenly, and it's like something lights up in their eyes. So I'd really like to get to the point where more people are able to use materials in a way that, that excites them and allows them to feel that it's something that they can do, that it's not seen as being this big masculine material anymore.